Welcome to the All Out Leadership Podcast, hosted by Pastor Eric Lawson, where each episode is uniquely designed to help you live all out by bringing you practical leadership from a biblical perspective delivered in 10 minutes or less. So whether you're a business leader, serving in ministry, or simply looking to grow in your leadership, this podcast is for you. Before we dive into this week's topic, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and download the show notes at ericlawson.com/podcast. And while you're at it, feel free to share the content on social media. Now, let's join Pastor Eric for this week's conversation.
We're continuing on the subject of greatness, and Jesus now moves from talking about the cross and gives a very practical description of what it means to be great. Jesus' disciples were arguing among themselves over who would be the greatest, and so we see that Jesus, after addressing that, he gives them an example of what it means to be great. And so he sat down, called the 12, and he said, "If anyone desires to be first, he shall be last of all and servant of all." And so he illustrates this. He goes, let me put this in a clear picture so that, you can't just define it yourselves. And he goes, then he took a little child and set them in the midst of them. And when he had taken him in his arms, he said to him, whoever receives one of these little children in my name receives me. Whoever receives me receives not just me, but him that sent me. And so we see that Jesus really defines greatness. What it means to truly be a big person is how you treat little people. A big person is someone who treats little people as bigger people. Our culture says, it's how big you are, and we, use all the wrong metrics to measure greatness: money, status, degrees, achievements. And so Jesus just blows apart the whole paradigm of what it means to be great. He goes down to the bottom of the totem pole of society, and that is he takes a child. And a child was basically like at the lowest in terms of any kind of value. Your opinion, we'll give it to you when we want it. Like there was just no value really in terms of a child's opinion. And our culture is this, I'll do something for people who can benefit me. I'll serve people when it helps serve my cause. A child can't repay you. A child can't do anything to help your career advancement. And so in this culture, people would just bypass kids. So Jesus takes a kid, and he doesn't just put him in the middle. He puts him on his lap, and he goes, all right, see this kid? Now, and these also breaking a bunch of Jewish kind of, man codes here, because men weren't very physically affectionate in terms of their kids or holding them, giving them hugs. It just really wasn't inside of their manly culture. And, here's Jesus. And I just appreciate that about him. He's just caring, and he's affectionate, and he's just, again, he's a reflection of our Heavenly Father. And so I just love to see this about Jesus. So the bottom line is this: Jesus is telling us how we treat little people is how we treat other. I need to edit that. How we treat little people really shows how big of a person we are. It's really a little person on the inside who treats, quote, perceived little people as little people. That bully who goes around, in school and they're beating up on, quote, the little people, the little nerd, that little dorky kid or whatever. That kid's not big. He may feel big, but he's not, because he can beat up on somebody else. What it really shows is how little he or she feels on the inside, picking on somebody else. I like what John Maxwell said. He said, it's hard to make somebody feel like a somebody when inwardly you think they're a nobody. How you treat everyday people and that person that society just kind of brushes off, how society might go, they're second class, that person in your company, maybe the janitor, maybe it's the receptionist, or that position that people don't really esteem. How you treat that person is really one of the greatest mirrors of who you actually are on the inside. It's big people who treat, quote, little people as bigger people. Again, because in God's economy, a lot of people that we walk by who we don't think are big, who we don't think are important, actually are significant inside of God's economy. I love the story of a lady named Pearl Good. She, in 1949, visited a Billy Graham crusade. She was a widow, and she went to Billy Graham's crusade, and she was in her 60s, and she was just really looking for that next step, that next call of God in her life. And after hearing young Billy Graham preach, she found her calling, and that was to be a part of supporting Billy Graham's crusade by prayer. So she joined the prayer team, and she, of her own money, bought bus fare to go anywhere where Billy Graham was preaching in the U.S. She got on that bus and she paid her own fare, paid for a cheap hotel near the crusade, and she just stayed up and continually prayed and interceded over those crusades. And she did this for years. And by her estimation, she traveled over 48,000 miles by Greyhound bus to support Billy Graham. And she did this out of her own money. And later in life, when she could no longer travel, she would still stay up through the night. Wherever Billy Graham was preaching, she would stay up and she'd be praying for him. And Billy Graham said this about her after she died. She prayed all night, many nights, and I could sense the presence and power of that prayer. And when she died, I felt it. The greatest evangelist of all times had great respect for this little widowed lady who for years just supported his ministry and prayer. But you know what? Pearl Good didn't make it on the cover of Who's Who. She didn't make it on the cover of Success Magazine, the cover of Entrepreneur, the cover of, Billionaire Today. But in the economy of God, I'm telling you, that lady is big and that lady is powerful. And when we treat, quote, little people as little, you know what? We're wrong. Because in God's eyes, there are no little people. There are no insignificant people. There are no unimportant people. And remember, Jesus said this, as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. You want to know how you treat Jesus? Just look at how you treat, quote, the littlest person in your life. The person you respect the least and how you treat them is exactly how you're treating Jesus. So look, you want to be a big shot? You want to be a big person? It's how you make others feel when they leave your presence. We've probably all experienced that person that when you're in their presence, you walk away and you feel like an idiot. For me, that's IT. Not my IT department, a different IT department, Sam, just heads up there. But there are some IT people that I've talked to over the years, and I walk away and I go, man, I'm an idiot. No, I'm not an idiot. Now, I'm ignorant in the area of technology, but there are other areas I'm relatively halfway decently average in intelligence. So I'm not a complete idiot. We all have areas we just lack, all right? So how you make other people feel when they leave your presence says a tremendous amount about you. Are you the guy, are you the girl who, when other people are around you, they walk away inspired about themselves? My goal isn't to impress you when you hang out with me. My goal is to inspire you that you can continue to do great and be greater. And so are you a person who inspires? Or are you a person that intimidates? Are you a person who just impresses others with how great you are? So I'll close with the story. When I was a youth pastor, God used this opportunity to check my heart and really just helping me understand there are no little people, no insignificant, unimportant people in his economy. There was this girl, her name was Maggie. And Maggie was a little different, and she wasn't all quite there. And everywhere I turned around, Maggie was there. And she would stalk me. I wanted to get a restraining order because everywhere I went, and I'm trying to work, I'm trying to talk to kids, do all these things, and Maggie was just everywhere. And it wasn't meaningful. I would turn around and bam, she's right there in my face, and she just had this blank stare. I go, hi, Maggie. She'd go, hi, Pastor Eric. And then there's this long, awkward pause, nothing. I go, how are you? I'm good. So what are you doing today? Things. It's you couldn't even have a conversation. It was just so annoying after a while. And so one day I was complaining to God. I was like, God, this girl is stopping me from being able to do ministry. And he just shut me down. He goes, Eric, she is your ministry. And so the Lord took me to the Bible verse, as you've done it unto the least of these, you've done it unto me. And so God really just said this, because at this time I was traveling all over the world, all over the country. I had, the largest youth group in America, 1,600 leaders would show up to our leadership conferences every year. Every weekend I'm on a plane flying somewhere. And, and when you're succeeding and you're, quote, on the top, if you aren't careful, you can get proud. You can, think, oh man, I'm great. We aren't. It's God in spite of us, not because of us. So there's times that God just gives us these little things. Paul called it his thorn in the flesh, that keeps us humble, that just keeps us dependent. Well, Maggie was mine. And so I actually learned to celebrate the gift of Maggie. And Maggie really became a gift. And I just called her my Jesus meter. And it really allowed me to realize and check my heart, how do I love Jesus and how do I treat Jesus? Because again, I didn't treat Jesus any better than I treated Maggie. So was Jesus an interruption in my day? Because Maggie's an interruption in my day. How I treat Maggie is how I treat Jesus. And you know what? We all have a Maggie somewhere, different face, different name, different type of situation, but we all get those Maggies, which are your Jesus meters. Why? Because in the economy of God, when we all stand before God, and the great judgment will be the great equalizer, what we're going to find out is the last will be first, and there are many who are first who will be last. And there are many who we thought were great, who in the economy of God really weren't. And there's going to be a bunch of little people, people didn't even know their name, but in the economy of God, they're going to be great. And I want to be the person who made sure I was treating all of those people great. And I don't want to be the guy to get stands before Jesus and find out I was not quite as great as I thought I was because I didn't treat people the way Jesus should be treated. All right, a couple more practical things Jesus talks about on what it means to be great. We'll hit that next week.
Thank you for joining us on the All Out Leadership Podcast. We hope you gained new biblical insight that challenged you to grow in your leadership. If you've enjoyed this week's episode, we would love your help in getting the content out farther. You can help by subscribing to the podcast at ericlawson.com/podcast and telling others about it. Next week, Pastor Eric will be back with another episode. So until then, we hope you have a great week being an all-out leader.